It's a bird! It's a plane! No, wait! It's another exciting episode of the Animation Deliberation podcast, where we are talking My Adventures with Superman, now airing on Max. Right after these ads, we have no control over.
You couldn't get rid of me that easily. Sing along if you know the words. A 1, 2, 3, it's time for Animation Deliberation. A conversation and a celebration of our favorite action animated series. Yeah!
Yeah! Welcome back to another episode of Animation Deliberation, the podcast where we take action animation and cartoons seriously, but not too seriously. We are your
And my
hosts.
name's J
I am
Scotty
Zuhair. Welcome back, my dude. As much as I enjoy doing the song, it does not have the flair that
it's
yours
good to
does.
be back. Took a little bit of a hiatus that might have lasted longer than intended, but it's good to be back. Indeed.
Rejuvenated and ready to go.
Okay.
Mine's pending now.
It's that time of year, vacation. We all, need to take a load off here and there.
Oh, yes. All right, man. So we got a new show in the works, and we're finally talking DC animation again. This might be an arguable statement, but it's one that stands, is that DC does a lot better animation stuff than they do live action, which works with us because it gives us a lot more stuff to talk about. We're excited to have a brand new content.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's
about.
A take, and it's a take I don't disagree with. I have been on record as not having been as critical of some of DC's live action outings as some people, or dare I say, even the general consensus seems to be, especially when you look at the box office returns for The Flash anyway. But yeah, DC has definitely had a strong showing in the world of animation, and just kind of, without getting super spoilery, just to kind of speak to the show, my Adventures with Superman is what we're talking about here. I remember seeing the headlines, knowing that this thing was coming down the pike, and I could not have been prepared for how absolutely enamored and delighted with this series. Just 3 episodes out of the gate. Like, maybe recency bias, but the jury's still out. But this very well might be my favorite version of Superman and Lois Lane ever. And I suspect that this is going to be a whole generation's, like, their Superman and their Lois Lane.
Mm-hmm. I remember us making the announcement on This Week in Animation that this was something that was coming up, but I had totally forgotten the details of it, except for Huey being the voice of Clark Kent. And when I watched the first episode, I was like, this is a perfect, beautiful blend between what we love about the simple animation of, like, the old Justice League series and the Batman animated series, but it's got that anime flair to it. So when I was looking up the synopsis not too long ago, turns out it's using the South Korean Studio Mir, which did Boondocks, Voltron, Dota Dragon's Blood, and my favorite of this list was Legend of Korra. So, it has quite the reputation, and everything about it just looks so beautiful and so well done, and it's just like the interaction just between the characters themselves just has me feeling bubbly inside. When there isn't that much action in the series, but when it's done, it's really good. But everything that leads up to it is just such a feel-good show.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Studio Mir, because it actually, like, really stood out to me as well. And it's worth mentioning that this is not their first foray with DC specifically. They did Young Justice Outsiders and Young Justice Phantoms. So we've said it many times, but Young Justice is kind of like the bread and butter of Animation Deliberation. It's what caused this show to start. Also, Harley Quinn, that one kind of surprised me, because I feel like that animation style is just a little bit different, but that goes to show their level of, like, versatility. And that's an animation style that I really like. But no, I'm right there with you. I think I found myself, like, while this does have the hallmarks of a lot of those previous projects and styles that we mentioned, I kind of felt like this reminded me of Invincible. I think Invincible employed, like, more like 3D and computer generated backgrounds or graphics and stuff like that in the backgrounds. But in terms of just being very bright and sunny, and, like, kind of the showcasing of, like, the action and the superpowers, definitely put me in mind of Invincible. This is a much more lighthearted series than Invincible, but in terms of like a very, very powerful character kind of coming into their own, I think the comparisons are there.
And with your comment about the 3D, I think that I
Hmm.
like this more than that. I like when they do like the opening shots looking over
Hmm.
Metropolis and it's more like brushstrokey. And I say that especially because it reminds me of the couple of episodes where it's like there's dialogue happening between characters and there's just like low render people like
Yeah.
chalkily like walking in the background. And it's like it's great for you for trying to put so much detail in this, but I cannot focus on anything happening in the story right now because what on earth are these people doing in the back? It's like when Jerry from Rick and Morty was like in a simulation and they had to
Oh
like
yeah, yeah,
lower his rendering power, so it's like
yeah.
people were just like
My
super
man.
chalky.
I love
So,
I love that episode. Yeah.
so yeah, there. I mean, James Gunn has come out and said that he appreciates the animated content that DC has done before taking over. So like, we know that it's going to be getting the love and appreciation
Hmm.
that it frankly deserves. And I don't know if this is directly his project or just something that he was constantly supporting, but like I'm glad it's
Yeah, it's a
here.
good question. I don't see him listed anywhere in the credits, so I'm not sure what level of involvement he has, if any. The one of the executive producers is Sam Register, who basically he's an executive producer on anything animated that comes from Warner Brothers, including Young Justice. So, all that being said, I do hope that James Gunn is paying attention, and I kind of I have a feeling that he is because I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but with Superman Legacy coming out, like when we heard about this series, I was kind of hopeful that like maybe the series would inform us about what kind of tone and vibe we could expect for Superman Legacy. And I think if James Gunn does anything close to what this series is doing, I'm going to be very, very satisfied with Superman Legacy. But
Hmm.
also, we got some casting news in the live action side of things with Superman Legacy, where Anthony Carrigan, who people may recognize as NoHo Hank from Barry, he was cast as Metamorpho. And as soon as I saw Metamorpho, I was like, okay, I've seen Metamorpho one other place ever, and that's in Young Justice. And he was partnered with the Guy Gardner version of Green Lantern. And we also got the casting news that Nathan Fillion is going to be playing the Guy Gardner version of Green Lantern in Superman Legacy. So I was like, okay, is James Gunn like actively watching Young Justice, and that's where he's like, making these character pairings? Because I certainly hope so.
I mean, he's kind of said that, right? That Justice League Unlimited and Young Justice is going to be kind of like the framework for like how they
Hmm.
move the live action stuff forward. So I guess he's staying true to his word
Let's
on
hope
that.
so. Let's hope so.
And one of the last things I guess I'll say, like spoiler free, before we move on to our synopsis, is that I feel like this storyline so far hasn't been
Hmm.
strictly following any material. Like it's just like here's the character and we're having fun with it. I've always been on the record of saying that my favorite version of Superman is the one from Young Justice
Right.
because he's not invincible. Because things like heavy rockets and explosions and things like
Hmm.
that actually affect him and bother him. So I'm hoping, really, really, that's the one request that I have is like just don't make him
Sure.
overpowered, right? Like we don't need to have only people from other worlds that can stop him. Like I like the pace that they're on, that there's human technology that can affect him, and I hope that they keep things
Yeah, I think
tempered to
that's
that
a
level.
legitimate request, and based on what we've seen so far, it seems like they're going to be pursuing that route. But we're only 3 episodes in, so we'll have to see. So,
Yeah.
that being said, are we ready to jump into a more spoilery section and knock out these synopses? Oh, sure.
So before we do, I want to tell you about
Okay.
my trip to Philly a couple of weeks ago because we went up for that annual sports fest, and this is my first time like doing a lot of sports stuff since my shoulder surgery. So it was definitely a lot.
Ladies
It
and
was
gentlemen, our
overwhelming.
very
It was
own
very
sports
sore.
master in the building.
I wouldn't call it a master at all. Aficionado, if anything. But yeah, dude, we started at 8 a.m., played outdoors on the turf in the sun. It was like 90 some degrees when we were like walking to start our first game. And we had two games back to back before we got an hour break and then did our third. And I got to tell you, the thing that saved my butt was Liquid IV. I was so dehydrated, so sweating. I have not worked that much in this year at all. You know, I just started coming back into martial arts, and that level of dehydration and the amount of energy that I was burning off snap after snap. I am so glad that I took a whole bag of these things because Lord knows I killed like
Mm.
half of it with it that morning alone. It's summer, it's hot, you know, your health is a priority, your hydration's a priority. You never realize how thirsty you actually are until you just literally cannot function. So, liquid IV is what you need to get through this hot,
Mhm.
unbearable summer.
Yeah, it's hot out there, so it's important to stay hydrated, and water alone is not the best thing that can hydrate you. If you add some electrolytes in there, that's going to hydrate you just that much faster, and that's exactly what Liquid IV does. It has 3
Mhm.
times the electrolytes of a traditional sports drink, I should say. And yeah, whether you're going to festivals and just dancing your head off in the hot sun, or you're hiking, like for instance, I was in Washington State and hiked Mount Rainier, and not only do you have the sun beating down on top of you, but there's still snow at that elevation, so you have the sun being reflected right back up into your face. So I'll speak for myself. I sweat a lot and lost a lot of water, so having liquid IV on hand like made all the difference in the world. And we did see a rescue helicopter up there in the peaks. And I'm sure it was because, somebody was probably training for Everest or something like that, but very well could have been a case of dehydration. So liquid IV might have prevented
Yep.
that.
Yeah, so let's give you a couple of details on why Liquid IV is so helpful. First off, one stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than water alone. It's got 12 delicious, refreshing flavors to keep your hydration routine exciting. Do you have a
I'm
favorite flavor?
partial to the lemon lime of the ones I've tried. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. That's
Yeah. It
like
kind of takes
tried
me
and
back to
true,
my
right? It's
my
or even like
original
the Spraggy
Gatorade
taste a little bit.
days. Yeah. How about you? What's your favorite? I know you said you tried the sea berry recently.
Oh yeah, that's so. I actually used the code to get myself some because I can. Lord knows I need it.
Okay.
The sea berry's actually been really good. I gave some to Sarah Day the other day, and she said that it doesn't top cherry yet,
Okay.
but it's like her second favorite now. So not an overwhelming flavor. I really do like the strawberry, but like it is
Oh,
like a
sure.
dessert type flavor. Like I don't like have strawberry throughout the day. I like it
Sure.
like after dinner because it makes me want cupcakes. And I'm trying
Right.
to fill myself up with water, not sweets. So like watermelon I feel like is the easiest to find in stores, but you guys are going to be getting this from
Yeah.
liquidiv.com. So you have the option to all these wonderful flavors. I do recommend the sea berry, and they actually have. This was exciting for one of our listeners who reached out to us, but they actually have sugar-free flavors now as well, and those sugar-free flavors come in white peach, lemon lime, and green grape. I'm gonna have to give that peach
Sugar,
one a try
sugar,
next.
bum, 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 bum. Yeah, but you mentioned a code that you used. What is that code?
That code
Oh,
is.
I'm ready.
Are you ready? It is. Stay whelmed. It is the code. It is the word. It is the phrase that is born to us of Young Justice, and it lives throughout our ad partners, it lives out through your brains, and it lives out
Yeah,
through
and using
your
the code
hydration.
stay whelmed, not yeah, stay whelmed, get you a whopping what percentage off?
It
Ooh,
gets you 20%
20%.
off your order. Get 20%. Get 20% off your order when you go to liquidiv.com and use code STAYWHELMED to checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code STAYWHELMED at
Do it and
liquidiv.com.
let the English see you do it.
Do it. Do it. Stay hydrated.
All right. Okay, let's move on to the synopses for episodes 1, 2, and 3 of My Adventures with Superman. So, starting with episodes 1 and 2, which were part 1 and part 2 of Adventures of a Normal Man. In Smallville, Kansas, excuse me. In Smallville, Kansas, a young Clark Kent discovers he has superpowers after awakening them to save a woman and her baby from a car accident. Years later, Clark and his alien conspiracy theorist roommate, Jimmy Olsen, go to the Daily Planet for their first day as interns, where they get convinced by senior intern Lois Lane, whom Clark has a crush on, to look into the theft of a military grade technology stockpile. Finding the thieves loading military robots at the Metropolis docks, they send a robot after the interns. After being knocked out of view by the robot, Clark disguises himself and uses his powers to destroy it, only for the thieves' leader to activate all the remaining robots. With Clark getting their attention, Lois successfully deactivates the robots, while Clark keeps her safe and keeps his secret identity, or his identity secret, rather. During the flight, he mysteriously develops new powers. Despite their work, Lois is unable to get her boss, Perry White, to publish the story of or the blurry photos they took without real proof of the metahuman who Lois dubbed Superman. And in part 2, obsessed with finding out more about Superman, Lois follows up on the thieves for a lead while Clark returns to Smallville to investigate his past and what is triggering his new powers. He activates a hologram speaking an alien language, sees mysterious visions of an alien planet apparently involved in a space war being destroyed, and finds himself in new alien clothing, which his mom Martha Kent adds a belt and a pair of shorts to. Meanwhile, the thieves' leader Leslie Willis attacks a team of secret agents from the organization she stole the technology from and arranges a meeting with their leader, Slade Wilson, during which she threatens to detonate explosives she lined in Metropolis's sewers unless they leave her alone. Lois and Jimmy inadvertently disrupt the meeting, turning it into a scramble for the detonator while Willis reveals she is wearing an electricity-based supersuit. Superman arrives and removes her suit's power crystal before destroying it after it gives him more visions of the space war. While Jimmy's clear photos convince Perry to publish the story, he gives the byline to staff reporters uninvolved in the incident. Concurrently, Willis is taken prisoner by Wilson, who tortures her for information about Superman.
All right, so based off these first two episodes, we
Okay.
got some feedback from Andre Sparks. Hey guys, after the first two episodes, I think it'll be a great show. First thing a lot of people are talking about is the intro of the suit. For the suit transformation, I would say it's nanotechnology, same way Iron Man transformed in Infinity War. Better way to suit up, no phone boots anymore. I always thought he was wearing the suit under his clothes was weird. I was told Jim Lee first introduced the idea in the new 52 run of Superman. Secondly, the show gives you a different Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Clark. These are young interns. I think it gives the characters a different energy. And do you all realize who was at the end? Keep up the good work, guys. Andre.
I'm assuming the final part of his email where he says, "Do you all realize who that was at the end?" I think he's talking about Deathstroke, if I'm not mistaken.
I
Oh,
didn't
really?
realize until we read the synopsis. Like, I was like, did I miss an
Oh, okay.
episode? Like, where was Slade in this? But, like, I will admit that I was just kind of a little foggy brain trying to, like, catch up on shows because there's, like, five
Sure.
shows that drop weekly right now that are just animated, and it's trying to fit Secret
Sure.
Invasion and a couple
Sure.
other things on top of that. So in my binge, I guess I must have missed that detail, and I need to go back and watch that because yeah, that's super exciting that we have people like
Yeah,
Slade
and
Wilson in
I
here
can kind
already.
of interpret Andre's feedback of "Did you realize who that was?" It can kind of have dual meanings there because he's also voiced by Chris Parnell, who is Jerry Smith from Rick and Morty. So I recognized
Oh
his voice like
god.
very early on, and I think that kind of made me like cue in like special attention to this character. But I don't think it was like super obvious. I mean, he obviously has like the white hair, but he doesn't have his eye patch yet. But they do a great job of like having his bangs kind of cover one of his eyes, so the illusion's there. And then
Mm-mm.
I think one person calls him Slade, and that's
Oh,
really the only hint you get.
I do remember like the hood being up and him kind of like turning his head, and like you can kind of like see the eye
Right.
underneath the bangs. Okay, okay, so I did see him. I thought it was like
Nah.
clear as day, and I'm just like, oh my god, but I
Mhm.
must have missed the name. Okay, that's really
Yeah, and
exciting.
him mentioning how this really is like with the characters all being interns. Like we have this trio, and I feel like some of the best shows like just have these trios. And I honestly think
Hmm.
that's like one of the best part of the shows. Like you and I talked a little bit off air, but you didn't really get into it. You said you were going to save your thoughts for the show, but with the title "My Adventures with Superman," like that begs the question: whose adventures with Superman? And I really think it could be any one of the three. It's like
Yeah,
sometimes it feels like Jimmy Olsen's like the main character, especially with like the end credits focusing on him just like jogging with his camera. But all,
I love that and relate to that so much. Like, you just had a good shoot and a good session, you're just, like, flipping through the cameras, like,
yeah,
wondering which ones you're gonna edit when you get home. I was hoping that, like,
yeah,
every episode was gonna be different, but
hmm
episode 3 kinda, like, repeated them.
mm.
I think the last one was different, but, that was just so exciting to see. Like, that's one of
yeah,
the credits you don't skip. The opener kind of has, like, the anime opener vibe, but it never drops into, like,
hmm
music. It's kind of like the
yeah,
build up and then just, like, ends. But everything about like the
hmm
opening and closing is so wonderful. And again, I like an uninvincible Superman. I like one that struggles. I like one that has to fight and deal with I mean, Clark Kent alone has so many like dialogues about
yeah,
justice and how it's wrong to steal and how we shouldn't be breaking the rules and Perry told us to do this. So for him to have to like fight with weaknesses on top of his like moral compass, I love that so much and I'm
yeah,
praying that the show like sticks to that. We get a lot of the goofiness and clumsiness that I feel like in live action we've only seen from I haven't seen
hmm
Superman and Lois, but that actor when he was in Supergirl and like featured from time to time, I loved his
yeah,
depiction of just being like super clumsy. So everything about that is wonderful. I love what they did with Lois. I love how Jimmy's just as much of a troublemaker as well. Like the way that they just like
right,
fist bump each other and they're on the
right,
same page and getting into trouble and her attitude and her
hmm
like sinister
yeah,
demeanor of like, oh, we're gonna break rules, we're gonna get the story. Just everything about their
yeah.
depiction has been so perfect so far, and it's again like I'm not a big comic person at all. So this is just I like superheroes and I like the story that
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
telling
I've
with
always
these
been a
heroes.
fan of Superman, but there is kind of like if there's ever been a criticism of Superman, and I think there are people on both sides of the camp, but I think there's kind of been this notion that like he's too good, like he's too much of a Boy Scout, and it's kind of hard to like relate and tell stories. And I think later interpretations have really like kind of like honed in on the fact that like he is an alien, he's adopted, so it's very much like this like he's an outsider that's just so willing to like give of himself to protect the people that he wants to be accepted by. And I think that's a great thread to follow. But I feel like this series, like right out of the gate, it's kind of doing what the MCU did for Captain America for me, where like on the surface, it's like Captain America is kind of
Okay.
a goofy, like wearing the red, white, and blue, like just super, super good character. And I got so endeared to the MCU version of Captain America, and it started with that first movie, the first Avenger that took place during World War II. And I feel like this series is just it's showing us who Clark and who Superman is and like in all of his interactions. And I think that's why Lois is such a great foil to him because like she's a good person, but she's willing to like bend the rules to get to her ultimate goal and just like constantly like
Hmm.
putting him up against that where he obviously has like this huge crush on her, but he's just like he's just like very questioning her methods and he wants to do the right thing. And even like the first scene that you get this slightest inclination that there might be romance between them when he goes into that bodega and the lady's like, "Oh, thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing that. You're always like doing things for other people." And that's why she like
It's so
falls for him.
cute.
It's not, I mean, he's obviously, very muscular and a good looking dude, but it's when she learns all these things about him, she's like, okay, this is a good dude. And I love that. And like, I'm not romantically interested in the character for a number of reasons, least of which is because he's an animated character. But I was right there. I was
Don't let that
I
stop you.
was right there with Lois when she was just like you could kind of see her heart melt, and I feel like in the same way I'm just like I'm getting endeared to this version of Clark and Superman very early on.
Hmm. This show is giving me hope that a tall person can fall in love with a short one.
Hey, if Elemental taught us anything, opposites attract.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. The just absolute great job with the
yeah.
I love
Oh yeah,
Perry so
Perry's
far
great. It
too.
feels like it's kind of like a nod to the Lawrence Fishburne version that we got, but doing its own thing as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
breaking news, water
Yeah, and
went.
they're having, like, these, like, conversations and revelations, like, in his office, and he's like, "Can you do this somewhere other than my office? Like, you're still in my office right now."
Yeah, I can't wait to see more of him. They've nailed
Yeah.
it on every character so
I
far.
guess the one other part of Andre's feedback that I want to tackle is that he's talking about the depiction of how, like, the Superman, yeah, how it kinda morphs over him with
Sailor
that,
Moon
like,
suit.
digitized look, and I think I really like that aesthetic. Not only is it, like, yeah, throwback to animes like Sailor Moon and just really has that vibe, I think it's, like, also just a really new and interesting depiction of Kryptonian technology, and with that in mind, it's like,
Mhm.
again, I think it's just one of the great things about this series so far is, like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that doesn't at least, like, loosely know the story of Superman and the origin of Superman. It's kind of like it's almost like entered like a level of mythology at this point. Like, we all know that Krypton was destroyed and his parents sent him back, sent him to Earth, and he was adopted by the Kents and became Superman. But it's like, even knowing like all that happened, this they're telling that story like a non-chronological way that's like keeping me interested in the way, like, when he first discovers his ship and like has his dad's hologram, like, they do that in like a way that's scary. It's like this alien language that he doesn't fully understand. It's super
Yeah.
destructive. And it's like, even though, yeah, I know the way the story is going to play out, I'm still super invested. And I think it kind of does go back to like the title, My Adventures with Superman. Who is the My? Like, and I think there's an argument to be made that as much as like they're talking about Lois and Jimmy, I feel like it's Clark too, because like it's this question, like, who am I? Who is Superman? Like, he is still discovering that just as
Mhm.
much as we all are. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say it was
Yeah.
us as the
Us
viewer, but
too.
I like that a lot too. It's our adventure. Yeah, like, us knowing the story and knowing Superman, it's like you hear his dad saying, like, "Jor-El, Jor-El, Jor." That's the only thing out of the
Right.
alien language that's standing out, and we're like, "That's you! That's you! He's trying to call you!" I think I interpreted the suit in a little different way. I thought there was kind of like a mill on the ship that like made the suit
Oh,
on him real quick, and now
okay.
he's just changing in and out of it. I thought they were just kind of giving it like that spectacular look for the initial showing of it instead of him
Interesting.
like getting dressed. And I feel like now he's actually like changing clothes, but I feel like he knows how fast he is, so he can just like go change his clothes and come back and not necessarily wearing it
Hmm.
underneath, like how Andre mentioned.
Interesting.
Because yeah, there's no phone booths anymore. It's hard enough to find a
Ain't
public
that the
restroom from
truth?
time to time. He's just swinging into a Wawa and
Yeah.
flying back out.
But I know we want to move on to the other synopsis here, but I guess while we're on this particular thread and kind of, yeah, well, kind of highlighting what I
So I'm
talked about
enjoying
with like
this.
knowing the story of Superman, I think another one of like the strong components of this story is the romance between Clark and Lois, and uh, it's not quite a love triangle, but the fact that like she doesn't know he's Superman yet at this point, that being thrown into the mix as well. Again, it's not like these characters haven't had myriad depictions and interpretations where it's well documented that they wind up together, but I still find myself like, I'm rooting for them. Like, they're not together yet, but I'm rooting for these kids. I think there's a
Hmm.
chance. Like, I want, it's kind of reminds me of the
Yeah,
early days of The Office with like Jim and Pam. It's like the will they, won't they, and like they're both too shy at this point. But I'm rooting for those kids.
which is funny to say
Right.
that Lois
Just
is shy. It's like, yeah, it's this
that's
version
the
of her, like the romantic in her is
yeah
shy, but it's still funny how
right.
outgoing and she has
Yeah,
like
that's
no
the only
boundaries for
area that
anything
she's shy.
else. In regards to Superman's background, I think Man of Steel is the only time I've ever seen like what actually happened to
Mm,
Krypton. So I'm excited to see like what this show's depiction of like when we have a, s- a I don't want to call it a filler episode, but an episode that's like dedicated to like the events of what happened. It looks like it's more of a takeover than it is somebody wasn't listening and
hmm.
it was an environmental based thing.
We will have to see. Yeah, we have very few.
Yeah, kind of like some type of Kryptonian civil war going on.
Yeah, yeah. Considering the fact that, yeah, we couldn't understand a word of what Jor El said. Who knows at this point? It could be the classic story of them drilling at their core too much and destabilizing like the planets. It could be an outside attacker like Brainiac or something like that we've seen in like Injustice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I need to put my Dothraki on hold
there
and
you
start
go.
learning Kryptonian.
Yeah.
So one thing kind of relevant to what we were talking about that's not in the synopsis is I love this little line between Clark and Lois from episode 3 where he brings in the coffee. He's like, "Oh, it's from my favorite place." I was like, "Oh yeah, it's just
Yeah,
John." I
right.
was like, "It was the other end of the city." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you were worth it. So just those little flirty things, like, yeah, you can keep the action to a minimum, but as long as you're giving me this type of energy and just beautiful animation and comedy and vibe to go with it, like I'm
Yeah.
one
No,
thousand percent down.
I'm right there with you. Like I I don't want to say like the series has been light on action so far, but it definitely seems like the focus is on relationships first and foremost, and then like the character development, and then
Character
like
development.
the action serves as like kind of like a nice cherry on top towards the ends of the episodes. At least that's the format and formula that seems to be followed at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. I could see closer to the end of the season or like when the stakes are higher, we
Hmm.
have a solidified villain that I mean, I've seen what they do with Korra. I have no doubts that the action's just gonna be
Yeah,
incredible to
and
watch.
all that to say, it's kind of surprising. I guess one of the reasons I was like almost kind of like surprised and delighted by how taken with this series I was is because I made the comparisons to Invincible, like just kind of going into this. I was like, okay, because this is coming out on Adult Swim, it's probably going to go for a similar vibe to Invincible, but it's really like embracing more of like the tame and like charming and like it feels sanitized doesn't seem like the right word, but it feels very like not even like kid friendly either, but it just feels like, wholesome and like safe for the whole family. And it's not really like delving into any like
Hmm.
innuendos or anything like that. And it's like, don't get me wrong, I love innuendos and like, why is the word escaping me? But crude humor and stuff like that. But I just, the way this series is going right now, I don't need any of that. Like, it's just delightful.
Yeah. Yeah. Delightful's a perfect word for that. So, talking about
Hmm.
episode 3, My Interview with Superman, Lois attempts to interview Superman, forcing Clark to figure out a way to help her while protecting his secret identity. However, she and the interns are also forced to contend with the Daily Planet's established Scoop Troop reporters who took credit for their Superman story: Steve Lombard, Cat Grant, and Ronnie Trope. Meanwhile, 3 operatives from the criminal organization Inner Gang obtain technology leftovers from Willis's fight with Superman. Taking the names Mist, Roughhouse, and Silver Banshee, they attempt to rob Metropolis's largest bank using an unstable ice cannon. While fighting Intergang, Superman develops heat vision and discovers the cannon is powered by another crystal that gives him visions of an invading robot army. After defeating Intergang, they are secretly taken to Wilson's organization. Eventually, Superman accepts an interview with Lois, where he tells her that he is still figuring out who he is, but is committed to saving people. However, Lois later tells Clark that she suspects Superman is lying,
Hmm.
to his dismay. Was it the end of episode 2 where who's the
Amanda
leader
Waller.
of Suicide Squad? The cranky.
I
Was
think it
she
was
was
episode
that
two.
the
Yeah.
end of that episode? Where it's like her and 2 other people were like
Yeah, I
interrogating
think she was in
somebody
the
about who is this
background.
guy?
She may have had a line or two, but yeah, it was pretty obvious that it was Amanda Waller to me.
I don't know why reading Wilson's organization reminded me of that, but it's I love how much they're building up to things. Like there's so much that we know that's teasing us, but there's so much that we
Hmm.
don't because it's a unique
Yeah.
story. When they showed Inner Gang, I thought about the Ice
Oh, sure.
family from Young Justice. I'm forgetting their names, but like I was wondering if this story, because of the way the ice cannon malfunctioned, was gonna like transform them into that.
Interesting thought. Yeah, I kind of similarly when I heard Inner Gang, I thought of Young Justice as well because I believe it was in Markovia we had Geoforce. I want to say when he had his team of like superheroes, like I feel like Intergang was involved, and he might have even called his group of heroes Intergang or something like. I don't know. I'm getting fuzzy on the details there, but I seem to remember Intergang like using technology from Apocalypse or something like that. Yeah, I feel like I definitely got the details wrong or whatnot, but did
Yeah, I don't remember any of these names, but it's Bruno Mannheim, Cairo Defray, Norman,
I
Scorpia
remember
Adair,
Dare and
and
Whisper
Whisper
Adair.
Adair.
Like that sticks out to me. I'm pretty sure she was the redhead. But anyway, I did find myself wondering. It was like, this technology doesn't seem like it's from Apocalypse quite yet. So I'm wondering if this is going to be like a different interpretation. And the crystals seem to be like the through line. So it's like I'm not ready to like make any guesses or speculation as to like a big bad at this point in time. But those crystals seem to be, and he hasn't had any reaction to them like they're kryptonite or anything like that. If anything, it seems to have
Hmm.
helped him like tap into other powers in his arsenal. So yeah, a lot of questions at this point.
Yeah, it could be something that's from another
Yeah,
planet, but
could
not
be.
necessarily Krypton.
Maybe Apocalypse. Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe it is Apocalypse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, I like the way that they used their weapons, how sneaky he was with it. I had to look up if Mist was the voice actor that plays Robin in Teen Titans because there was a lot of
Oh
similarities
yeah.
to like just the
Was
way
it?
that he carried it. But I absolutely love Silver Banshee and how she had her dialogue and like how the last line was where she threw out her attack, especially because a lot of the times like
Okay.
they saw it for the first time. But this is the second set of villains where they've
Yeah.
just been like super clumsy. It's like I told
Yeah.
you to stop using our real name, and before it was just like, why did you turn on all of the robots? Like he just like swiped his hand on the buttons. So I mean, just the humor in all these serious situations are
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I
very
agree.
well
And
placed.
they use the real name so often. I think I like remembered his real name was Kyle more than I remembered that his name was Mist. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't know
and
it was missed until I read it just
Silver
now.
Banshee stuck out to me just because how striking the mask that she wore and her silver hair, like that stuck with me. And I was also like, okay, so Silver Banshee is basically like an evil version of the Black Canary. And the fact that her name was Siobhan like stuck out
Hmm.
to me as well because Succession and the character of Shiv, her real name is Siobhan, but that's a whole nother tangent. But you brought up the voice actor for Kyle, aka the Mist, and it made me look him up, and it's Lucas Grabeel. Do you know who that is? He was in
Mm-mm.
the High School Musical film series. He was Ryan Evans, who was Sharpay's brother. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. So that guy's still working.
Wow. Yeah, I'm wondering what he's. I mean,
What's he
no,
been
I
up
actually
to?
haven't, but whole Tony Hawk moment. If he's like,
Oh,
he's right
really?
in
That
front of me, I
happened?
had no idea. No, no, no. Just there's this thing where it's like Tony Hawk tweets all of his instances where people are like, "You look like
Oh,
Tony
okay,
Hawk. Wonder what he's been up to." He
okay.
was just like this.
Interesting. Okay, that's
Just reminded me of that.
internet. Yeah,
No, I'm sure that would happen to me too, though.
sure.
I'm victim of that. I mean, you know how much pay attention to people's names and voice actors and directors and stuff. Like I could be sitting next to Kevin Feige and it would take a second to just be like, "Oh my god, you're him."
Yeah, sure, sure. I'll be honest. Yeah, if I hadn't looked him up, I don't know if I would probably would have said something along the lines like Lucas Grabeel. That sounds really familiar, but I can't place it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's if you have more to say on this episode, I'll kind of let you gush. But I don't know. I didn't. I enjoyed the episode. I definitely enjoyed the episode, and it seemed to like be
Yeah.
following a similar trajectory, and I found it super enjoyable and super delightful. But I don't have too much to say about this episode individually, but I just keep finding myself like going back to like why this series as a whole just like has me like right out of the gate, and it's like there's this term called save the cat that like Matthew Carroll like definitely like indoctrinated me with. Like I knew it was a concept, but he brings it up so often that like now it's like common vernacular for me to use. And what's interesting is like the whole concept of save the
Hmm.
cat, like have your character save a cat to prove that like they care about like, innocence and those that are weak and can't protect themselves. Like that actually comes from Superman originally. Like he is the original person that saves the cat. And in
Hmm.
that opening episode, they had him. save a cat out of a tree, like as he's on his way to Metropolis or to the internship. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was
And
already
then
late.
the trunks. So having Martha Kent like make the trunks that he wears on the outside, like that's just great. Like a lot of versions of Superman don't incorporate the trunks, and I don't knock them for it. It's a pretty goofy thing, but the fact that like they don't make it a joke. Like they make it a heartwarming moment between Clark and Martha. Like she's like, I made these for you because I think it'd just look better. And it's like, you know what? It does look better in this instance. Good on you.
Yeah, just the way that he comes up with it in this episode. I in my head I was just kind of like, all right, that's
Okay.
the Adult Swim
Sure.
humor that could go for this, where it's like he actually does need to cover up a little bit. It's a
Okay.
little too
There you go.
skin tight, if you know what I mean. So I'll take that, but regardless of whether it's Martha
Yeah.
making it or if he's actually trying to cover up, at least it has function. It's not like
Yeah.
wearing
Yeah.
outside underwear just to wear outside underwear. It is a good look,
Oh
and I
yeah.
love
That's
what he
great.
does with his hair. It's a nice, like, faded look, and how when he runs up the
Yeah.
staircase and has to like
Yeah.
shake it up really quick. It like the fact that he genuinely wants to stand out from how he looks because of how much he's in front of Lois, and how much he goes out of his way to protect her, is those looks are just very important, and I just
Yeah.
love the
And
way
this
it
is one of
is.
those like depictions of Superman where I don't find my suspension of disbelief like really strained when you have Superman and then Clark like going from like one scene like literally seconds from seeing one to the other. Like I still buy it at this point that like he's his body language and just the way he presents himself and scruffing up the hair and everything like that, like he just comes across as so much more confident as Superman. So like I buy into the fact that people would never be looking towards Clark to be like, is this guy Superman? And like we're still like learning about Superman at this point
Yeah.
anyway, so like why would anyone suspect that Superman even has a secret identity? It's just like, okay, he shows up when he's needed, but outside of that we shouldn't be like thinking that he's a, you know,
Hmm.
regular citizen of Metropolis or anything like that. And you mentioned the
Yeah.
Superman and Lois for like the CW version, and I believe that actor's name is Tyler Hoechlin. And kind of like you, my only exposure to him really was in Supergirl, like the first season 2, season 3 that he popped up there. Okay. But
Season two.
I have
Yeah.
seen like the classic Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve Superman movies, and I found myself I felt like it evoked that very strongly, where like you've got one actor playing both roles, but the way that he's able to like really everything from the way he just like holds himself with his posture and speaks and everything like that, they do really feel like two completely different characters with just the tiniest like thread connecting them.
And you can see the click for him when he picks up
Mm-hmm.
Lois, which is also really cute, for the interview, because because he hesitates to like, oh no, I have to panic, and then the charm in his smile just comes in, and this is when he realizes like he can be his a whole other person right now. Like he doesn't have to be Clark Kent. This is where you
Yeah,
see the split in that confidence of
yeah.
like,
But
I'm
then
Superman.
there's a great comedic moment too, where he like once he's back as Clark, like he takes the opportunity, like, so what'd you think of Superman? Pretty great, right? And she's like, no,
That was the
no,
last
he's a
thing I wanted
liar.
to
He's like,
gush
oh
about.
god, it's like that's that great. Like I feel like that was definitely a his reaction was like a throwback to the animes that this series is inspired by as well. Like that was just perfect comedic timing.
Yeah, that the look on her face was priceless. She was like, I I can't remember the Disney movie right now, but just the cats that have like the evil villainous
Yeah,
faces, like they're ready to
yeah,
cause mischief. Like that's exactly what that was, and it was such
yeah.
a perfect
She's
way
got
to
kind of
end
like
that
this
episode.
mad zany energy. Like her brow gets kind of like arched, and she's like, "Oh no, he's a liar. I'm gonna find him out."
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's got the
yeah,
big grin with the sharp teeth. Like, oh yeah, this interview's still going on. This investigation's still going
yeah,
on.
yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, I was about to say, talking about the goofiness, how did we not
We're
talk about when
we're
they were
right on the same page right now
impersonating?
because that's exactly where I was gonna go to. Her Cat Grant impression was
Go for it.
awesome. And she's like, "What did the guy say?" He was like, "Oh no." The cop was like, "I didn't see you at the like press conference early." And it's like, "Oh, we don't like to draw attention to ourselves." But like, you just pirouetted into my office like not 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, this is the warden. It's just like, you should know, you're press. Like, we have protocols, but it's like
Yeah.
their pictures are on that ID. Like the animators did a really good job in making that
Yeah.
stand out. It's like, who are you again? And she's just
Yeah.
like trying to like flail it around so
Yeah.
they don't pay
Yeah.
attention to it.
That was super good.
And then he's like, Clark is just like slumped down. He was like, and I'm Ronnie. She gets
Steve. It
smacked.
was Steve that was on
Sports.
sports. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Steve.
yeah, that was all great, and even like outside of them doing the impressions, just the introductions to those characters that they were portraying was pretty great. Like Cat Grant, the only exposure I have to her is
Mm-hmm.
again Callista Flockhart's. Yeah, her
Supergirl.
portrayal in Supergirl. I think she was just in the first season, but I think she says something along the lines of like, "If you don't have anything nice to say, come sit next to me, but not too close." And then Lois is able to kind of like capture that energy perfectly, where she was like, "I can't." She's like, "If you have news that's not news, I'm your girl," or something like that. It's just like that's great.
Yeah, there was like a couple Cat Grant
Oh, that's
instances
right.
in Young
That's
Justice, but
right.
it was just like quick
Yeah.
reporter stuff, like when you see her on the news. You didn't see like that
Right.
level of
Right.
flair
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah. Good
Supergirl and
call.
this
Good
show
call.
did.
While we're on the subject of comedy, though, another beat that I really appreciated in episode 3 that like only worked because of what we were presented with episode 1 and 2 is when Clark kind of discovers he was like, "Oh, the only reason you came here is because you wanted to be taken hostage to lure Superman out so you could get your chance to interview him." And I think it's Jimmy that says it worked when we did it with Livewire in the last episode. He's like, "That was the whole reason you did that." His
His absolute shock. And his
yeah,
absolute innocence in this
yeah,
is just so
yeah, yeah.
wonderful.
I don't know who Jack Quaid's agent is, but they need a raise because between Jack Quaid being in The Boys, popping up in Scream, now he's been in Star Trek and this, and he voiced Peter Parker in one of the versions of Peter Parker and Across the Spider-Verse. Like this man is becoming prolific in all our favorite like fandoms. So
Yeah.
good on him, and he's doing a great job. So I'm
Yeah.
fully support.
Well, they're trying to find writers' money before they
Good
give
point.
him a
Good
raise.
point. At least animation is not super impacted at this point. Like obviously, animated movies are impacted by the writer strike and the actor strike, but
Yeah.
the animation guild, for the most part, exists as its own kind of entity. So yeah, I'm fully in support
Yeah.
of people getting their due compensation, and especially with like streaming and the emergence of AI. Obviously, things need to be reworked and whatnot, but it does give me some glimmer of hope that animation probably won't be impacted to the same extent. At least animation on TV, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just hope it just gets
Mm-hmm.
resolved for everybody soon. Based off the way that we were just talking about this humor, in terms of vibe, you know what anime this really resembles?
I thought you were going to go there, but I was
Spy
hesitant
Family.
to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that we were just talking about Clark just gave me such Anya vibes of just like going with the flow and just responding to everything. And it's mostly
Uh
comedic,
huh.
but it's fantastic animation and great
Yeah.
action when we
No,
do
I'm,
get
I'm
it.
I'm with you. I think the general vibe and kind of like that wholesome but wildly entertaining aesthetic. Yeah, I think it's definitely in keeping with Spy Family. And now I just
Hmm.
need Clark going gong.
I need
Yes,
Crypto going Borf.
yes, yes, yes. Oh, good times, good times.
Yeah. So for the listeners, we're doing two shows that are going to be covered episodic on a weekly basis. We have My Adventures with Superman. The plan right now is to try to record those on Monday evenings so that they're out next day. And then we're doing Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 on Thursday evenings and
Mm-hmm.
trying to get those out the next day. So if you guys want to send your feedback accordingly, obviously would love to read it out. Thank you to Andre and thank you to all the DC animation fans that are following us and supporting us and telling us what you want to hear about. We've had loose discussions about this, but just to keep you guys in the loop, we're talking about while we have our weekly coverage of a show or two, we do want to talk about like season recaps of things more often. There's talks of trying to get seasons of Rebels in. Me and BBK are trying to find time to do the Black Clover movie. So it's just a lot of content that we're trying to cover in our busy lives. But obviously, we love doing this. So we're just trying to find the best way to make it work. So if there's any suggestions that you guys have, if you're enjoying the covers that we have so far, we would love to hear from you guys. Animation Deliberation Podcast at gmail.com, or slide into DMs for all of our social medias.
Yes, indeed. So on that note, thank you so much for listening and keep tuning in. That's TOONIN.
And as always, stay whelmed. Thank you for listening to the Animation Deliberation Podcast, a proud member of the Stranded Panda Network. If you would like to contact us, you can email animationdeliberationpodcast at gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at animationdelib1. For this and other great shows, you can visit strandedpanda.com or join the great community that is the Stranded Panda Chat Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/spchat. Tune in next time, and remember, stay whelmed.